our ancestors, that spell, so it's almost like we're reverse engineering it. That spell came out of their relationship with the lemon.
Hello and welcome to Priestess of Ordinary Things, a podcast for spiritual misfits, modern mystics, and folks of all genders tasked with tending the sacred within everyday life. My name is Kate Fontana. I'm a psychic, a pagan priestess with Christian vibes, and mentor to the spiritual fringe. I help spiritual misfits like you connect in down-to-earth ways to your innate resilient center, and to nurture reluctant leaders on their sacred priestess path. Welcome. This is part 2 of my conversation with Lisa. If you missed part 1, I'll invite you to go back and listen to it, either before or after this one. And just in case you missed it, here's the recap on Lisa. Lisa Fazio is a clinical herbalist, author, and folkloric witch trained in traditional Western herbalism, Western astrology, and the ancestral healing ways of her Italian immigrant family. Enjoy.
In reference to people you work with or who aren't coming with that like enclave direct pool of, what I imagine for you were just like commonplace daily rituals, and not, we call them rituals now because there's a distinction from like how we live, but that wasn't the case.
No.
So yeah, how do you work with people around that?
Yeah, there's a few ways. So one is that I don't really think it's helpful if we just dislocate traditional practices and then, like you said, just have them as an intellectual or ideological concept
Yeah.
without them being contextualized.
Yeah, which is what a lot of, witch talk or whatever, which is very fun, but like it's not just about learning a protocol. And it sounds like even the protocol is so contextual, it wouldn't work or it wouldn't matter. Right.
So there's a couple of things that first I'll say I don't actually know all of, like I feel like, as, people of European descent in diaspora on Turtle Island, um, living in the conditions that we're living in, that in terms of our ancestral traditions, one of the first things we can do is just realize that that is the condition that we're living in.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'll just say that part of what led me to this, which into ancestral work in general, was my work as an herbalist in place, working with the plants here, as well as being in collaboration with friends and teachers from the Mohawk Nation, and in learning from them, and then really finding myself deeply loving my where I live.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when I settled into that love, um, I realized that I needed to understand myself in relationship, not just to like the land and the landscape, but the whole cultural complex, or what sometimes is called the social field.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So somebody just asked me about this at a class I was teaching in Syracuse, actually, at the Syracuse Herbal Study Group. I was teaching about bioregional herbalism, and somebody said, why? Why? And I said, well, for me, it's really about intimacy
Mm.
with my life place. And so, and I feel also Italy is one of my life places. Like, I don't think you just get one, and I don't think it means that you can't move around. I think um, it's just about when you do begin to settle and open to being in relationship with a place and the spirits of place and the history of that place, that understanding yourself in that matrix is super important. And so I feel like the first thing is that
Mm-hmm.
understanding myself, including in the power dynamics um, of being here. And I feel like to truly, for me, to really grow into that love and intimacy of place, it had to include it couldn't just include the things I liked about it.
Mm.
And it also couldn't deny that I'm a displaced person, and that and many as many of us are, and that we have lost things that we will never get back.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a grief part of it. I mean, we could get into the undigested grief. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that some of it came out of a what I felt was like a responsibility,
Yeah.
as well as being directly told by Indigenous people, hey, it really helps us if you all could just figure out where you came from and why you're here, right? Without determining whether it's good or bad, even, like how did you even
Mm-hmm.
get here? And so one thing I would say for people of European descent is when you do your ancestry, and you're not going to get, no, there's going to be missing pieces. Some people don't even know, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you can get ancestry DNA that gives you an idea, but you just got to get as close as you can get to understanding, how did we get here? My Irish side, like I know my great grandfather, he emigrated in like 1873 after the famine. And so I kind of know some of his story. I really don't know anything about those people, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's all lost. I don't know. I know most of them came during the famine because I traced it. Um, so, we just got to get an approximation of like what happened and how did we get here. And so
Mm-hmm.
then in terms of like reclamation of like folk medicine or ancestral traditions, we're not going back in time. We're not going to recreate um an Italian village
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
here. So, and this was one of the questions I had to ask myself a lot before I decided to write a book about it, because I was like, why?
Mm-hmm.
Other than entertainment purposes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And also not wanting to, and I don't know if we can really call it cultural appropriation when we're talking about our own ancestral cultures, but I think there is something about not extracting and then exploiting
Yeah.
traditions that we've actually lost contact with
Yeah.
or that have changed drastically for us. But and traditions are meant to change. I mean, a living tradition is
It
is not
does. Yeah.
not static. It's supposed to
Mm-hmm.
be. It's inherently um adaptive. So for me, if we're working with a folk technique or a tradition or a belief system, it has to be relevant. And for me anyway, in service to the conditions that I'm in.
Yeah.
And there's not just one way to do that. So you mentioned, like so I have with some of my friends, we have this running joke because at some point somebody saw like I think it was probably a witch chalk, like somebody doing an Italian, Southern Italian lemon spell or something like this, and like they gave instructions on how to do a lemon spell, and which is fine, whatever. But the thing is that that's not going to really the our ancestors, they that spell. So it's almost like we're doing it, we're reverse engineering it. That spell came out of their relationship with the lemon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So a step-by-step lemon spell is not going to teach you about being in relationship with,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
The only way that you are going to get that is if you can contextualize it. So if it starts to have meaning in your environment, in your landscape, in your ecology, inner or outer, and if you start to form a relationship with that practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you do that, that's when you're actually performing magic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
And
there's no rule book that you can follow for that.
right. It's like the spell will the when you form the relationship with the lemon will tell you what the spell is.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So, I do Malocchio cures with water and oil, um and that's another one. It's very hard to interpret. It's very hard to because there's a lot of potential variables. Different different families interpret the results differently. It's a form of divination, really. Um, and so you can follow step by step. And there's actually now you can look up YouTube videos. There's people who've done YouTube videos on it. Um, which I have different thoughts on. Because was a secret transmission. This was something
Mm,
transmitted a certain way, a certain place, a certain time by certain people, and
hmm
the words were secret. Now, um, we don't have that largely anymore. And so I do think we have to change to bring this forward. But one thing I can say is in my experience that so it's like you can look up like, what is it? How do you know if you have the molecular? And you can get a bunch of different answers, like the oil does this or the oil does that.
mm,
But the thing is, that's there, but also it's almost like I almost know the minute the oil hits the water before I even see it
hmm hmm
because there's a felt sense. There's a sound that it makes.
hmm
Like it's a very subtle thing.
mm,
And I know I'm like, oh yeah, this is a this in that and then I can look at what the oil did. But that took so much practice.
hmm hmm
It just took doing it over and over and over and over again. Um, before I was like, oh, okay. And I'm assuming, I'm probably going to learn more as I keep practicing.
hmm hmm mm,
So then that question always comes up. Well, I didn't have anybody to pass it on. Nobody, people, my students or people who, message me. I didn't have anybody to pass this on to me. And I guess that's where the question of, well, there is YouTube, maybe you know,
Yeah, or I mean, I'm almost, or I can speak from my experience and also what I'm feeling in that in a person like that's question is I feel like you start with that. You start with the grief of that. Like whatever is present is the doorway to where how you got there.
Yes.
Do
So
you
if
think?
I well, if I, so,
Or
I'm
no?
careful about, no, so if I was going to answer that question, so, I want to make things accessible to people and,
Yeah.
I want people to not get totally like, well,
Yeah.
but if
True.
I was going to answer that question honestly, I would say, yes, you start with that. If you want to learn that, if that's something that you want to learn, then you start with just take the easier pathways. Like, to learn about Italian or any culture, you don't need that secret formula, right? You can start with anything. Start reading, start learning. Go to the nearest Catholic church if you are in an Italian neighborhood near you. Start asking questions, start connecting with people, and hold that intention
Mm, hmm hmm
until you find somebody who can teach it to you.
hmm hmm
And you might not, but then it's not for you.
hmm
And I don't mean don't put effort into it. And I'll also say this. So many people are like, "Oh, nobody knows anything. Nobody in my family." And I'm like, maybe not, but just ask. I can't tell you how many people have said, "You know what I found out? My cousin, my great aunt, she actually knows how to do this, and she said she'd teach me."
Mm, hmm
Right? And they just assumed because it's not talked about, and you kind of you touched on it, like, what does Italian folk medicine look like in your daily life growing up in an Italian American enclave? Like, well, nothing.
Yeah. You wouldn't even distinguish it. Yeah. I mean, I'm imagining similarly, you would talk to your great aunt or like, I'm thinking of just like things that I would have taken for granted. Like every time in my family, we have Irish lineage on one side, Italian on another, but it's actually my Irish side. When you're looking for a parking spot, you pray to Mother Boniface. That's just like, and that's not necessarily ancestral because they didn't have cars or whatever, um, but it's definitely magic that's like interlinked with a patron saint devotion or like my grandparents would do this too. You put an upside down statue of Saint Joseph. This
Yeah.
is a pretty common one, right? In your
Yeah.
yard when you're trying to sell your house. And I imagine that there are tidbits that have been just assumed into life or quirks or um, that
Right.
it's not all lost, but you might have taken for granted or it might have just blended in a way that made it indistinguishable.
Right. I mean, even so as I, was writing my book and learning more about Italian folk medicine myself in southern Italy in particular, I realized some of the things that I saw my grandmother, my grandparents, and my aunts, uncles doing that I didn't think anything of. That then I was like, oh, okay, so that that was magic that they were doing. It just seemed either like weird Italian stuff to me, um, or I just disregarded it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so there's that part. The other thing I would say is that at least this tradition, and I would say probably, I don't know all folk traditions, but I would say, well, from what I understand of them, their lineage, their lineage traditions. And I think if you are interested in practicing lineage traditions, I would say herbal medicine, even in the like modern form, maybe not so much anymore, but definitely when I started into it was also a lineage tradition. And by lineage
Mm-hmm.
tradition, I mean that you're following, like you've got a teacher who learned from a teacher who's learned from
Mm-hmm.
a um that you would take any steps that you would to learn any lineage. So we do this often with like Buddhist traditions or Hindu traditions, and some of it is because they are so accessible
Mm-hmm.
in the West. Um, but those are also lineage traditions, and I would say that learning your own and even if it's your own ancestry, it's that you're stepping into that type of social contract
Mm-hmm.
with whether it's the ancestors or, living teachers, um, that you would respect and abide by that lineage, and that in and of itself will contextualize it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, so I guess the answer is that, we have to, and I think this is what we're working on is like sort of sewing what we gather from our ancestral traditions into the way that we relate now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there any part of your learning or teaching or practice that's feeling really alive for you right now, or feels like a question you're pondering or a lesson you're learning, a message you're receiving, a practice that's
So, yeah, there's a few. I think right now in particular, um, any folk or maybe what we would call village healing practices, um, or any survival practices right now are super important as a form of resistance.
mm-hmm,
So I would say that like that, and I think that's for me, one of the like primary drivers of my work is um I often refer to it as like this rhizomatic um
mm,
structure that's like um essentially anarchist,
mm-hmm,
um
decentralized.
decentralized as well as right. So decentralized, and you've got different um autonomous yet connected um groups or systems that are working together um for survival. So a lot of our folk medicines come from um times when people needed them to survive. So didn't have
Yeah.
access to healthcare, didn't have access to any sort of social system or institutionalized system that was going to help them. With that comes a lot of interdependence, which I think is something that we really don't know how to do well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it was interesting just before our call today, somebody had sent me this video of actually Trevor Noah
Mm,
speaking about the village. And he was speaking with Josh Johnson, who's this like really funny comedian that I love, and somebody else who I didn't know. Um, how developing countries, I'm not sure, I'm not probably going to say it exactly the way he did, but it was basically that like developing, one of the things we lose in developing countries is the village, and that we end up actually having to buy it. Like we
yeah.
have to pay for childcare, we have to pay for somebody to clean our house, we have to pay for, so we have to basically buy what would have been already a default.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So so there's a bunch with that. So one is intentional communities don't really create that type of interdependence that a village did
Mm-hmm.
because you can leave them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Your survival is not dependent on working things out with people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that I'm not saying all is lost. It's just I think about this a lot. Like, how do we create a village type network? I mean, mutual aid, I feel like is one of the ways that this is happening. Um,
Well, and I would say there's definitely like a class differential with that as well, because there are communities that are, you know, have always had to operate for survival. Um, but it's within the fringes of capitalism, which I think the village still becomes pretty difficult to recreate. Um, I mean, I just think about I think my lesson in that was like, yeah, I've had this soapbox about the loss of the village for a while, and my and like my partner and I, we'd like to have a child or children, and but I'm like really convicted about not raising a child in a single family home. Um, and kind of have talked to them a lot about like nurturing village and whatever. And their response had been like, well, we were poor and we always had people living with us, or we were always living with other people, or like we lived in apartments and there were people around. And um, I think the transiency is still that still makes a difference. Like that really hit me when you're saying like we don't have the alchemy of a village because we can leave. Um, and I think that is like such a potent piece to it. I think maybe it was Maladomo Some, a piece of his writing or sharing about like that in the West, we have literally no idea what community actually feels like. Um, and, almost back to the piece you said about when it came to like relating to land and place, you had to face the things. You couldn't just pick the things you liked. You had to really work with the embracing and sitting with the things you don't like. And we are not skilled in that. Um, I think that's
and I would say we don't, this is one of the things. So, there's still to this day in southern Italy and Sicily and Sardinia, I'd say I've never been to Sardinia, but for sure in southern Italy and in Sicily, that collectivism that happens in a village.
mm-hmm,
And as I mentioned I think in the beginning, one of the things that I rejected growing up was the pull of the family in Italian culture.
yeah,
Because you're
uh-huh,
part of an Italian family, and this is probably true of other cultures as well. You're not an individual.
yes, I can totally relate to this. Yes.
So like I'm like, well, I want to go to I want to quit the flute. You can't quit the flute. Your grandfather was a flute player. We're all flute players. Your great grandmother, she paid so that, Nono could take the bus to go to his piano lessons and she didn't have a dime. You know what I mean? Like you can't quit. It's like the whole family. Like you're insulting all of your ancestors if you quit the flute. Like you can't do anything. And
Mm-hmm,
it's so there's a bunch of things here, right? So, and it's like if you go to like a village in southern Italy, it's like they're very traditional, like,
mm-hmm,
right? Like it's all Catholic,
mm-hmm.
right? It's like I said in the beginning, I grew up in a refugee city, like, my neighborhood that I grew up in, like we've got Buddhist temples, we've got mosques, we've got, all like every denomination. Like you go to southern Italy, you don't see that. It's just a Catholic church.
There's a homogeneity maybe that,
There's a homogeneity, and then also like if you step out, so
yeah.
so just staying in my family village, right? Where my grandfather grew up. I mean, I would literally like when I was going somewhere, because like I did, I'd like look to make sure there weren't any old ladies walking by because if there were, which it was really cute, but in some ways I was just like, I just want to go get in my car and I don't want to have to answer 100 questions. Like they would literally like, where are you going? When are you coming back? You're driving? Like because I'm a woman by myself,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So like, and I mean, it was, for me, it's like, oh, it's really sweet or whatever. And, but I did find myself, I'm like, okay, they just made their last pass through. I think I can get down the steps and over to my car
Yeah.
before I
Yeah.
get asked 100 questions about where I'm going, and when I'm coming back and who I'm going with. And so I think how many Americans would want to put up with that?
Right. Yeah. I think it's so true. I mean, I think my my family definitely has the family first, a sort of like family at all costs kind of thing, you togetherness at all costs. And yeah, I had to really reckon with like finding the like letting myself have my own boundaries, like have my own like selfhood in that. And kind of I think this is a piece that Malidoma is like is that community is very inconvenient and from on the spectrum of inconvenient to oppressive, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
and
yes.
it
It's
really
oppressive. In a
yeah,
completely different way. I mean, we're all oppressed in some way, but like in a way where it's just like I want to like, I don't want to play the food. I want to run off to wherever, you know what I
yeah,
mean? And you can't tell me what to do.
right. Right. Which maybe relates back to the contextualization of, it's not about going back and recreating the village. We can't do that. And there are many ways we probably don't want to.
We don't.
And what is the contextual synthesis in modern times, given the like
Right.
sensibilities and values that we do have, like, you know, individualism that doesn't have to be to the extreme that
Exactly.
that has been calcified in our dominant culture, but like there's value in that.
I think it's what we're being called to
Yeah,
is
that's the emergent.
how can we create quote unquote, I always say that I've had this thing for years. What is a healthy human community, right? Like, what is healthy human community? Like, do we even know what that is? How can we
Hmm.
create healthy human community where people can differentiate themselves from others, have autonomy, and not face that oppression of you have to you have to keep these social contracts, even if you have to mangle yourself to do that.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, individuation with interdependence and within a reciprocal web still.
Right. So it's like, how am I? And I think I think this is one of the questions. So anybody doing ancestral work, right? And this is with my students, the people that I work with, this is one of the things we start with is um, making a document, basically a living document of ethics and principles.
Mm. Hmm. Like
So
as a group or a cohort,
yeah,
or
we do it
it.
well. We do it there. I share mine with it. So I have one that I've had for since I as an herbalist. Um, and then it's change and I change it, and then I share mine, and then they get like it's like a little workshop, and they get a worksheet, and then they can start their own because mine aren't
Mm.
necessarily going to be theirs,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Because everybody's going to be situated differently. Um, And we can put that in our so I say we can put this in your ethics and principles, right? How can I um how can I center my myself as an individual, my agency over my life, as well as may be in relationship and understand my impact,
Hmm.
right? Because
Hmm.
there's like also responsibility, like I mean, and this is what like we have this extreme individualism where we don't care about how we're impacting other people,
Hmm.
right? So it's like I'm impacting my presence here, racialized white, my identity, whatever, that has an impact that is ongoing. Even if it's not my personal response, even if I'm not culpable, I'm responsible.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And um, so how can I be myself in my fullness at the same time as I'm conti not abandoning the relationships that I am in, that I value, and that the others that I impact.
Yeah. As always with these, I feel like there could be so much more. I do want to honor your time. Um, is there maybe I'll just and we can close with like, is there anything else on your mind or on your heart or that you want people to know or take away?
So, okay, yes. So the one thing, this is the thing, magic and or whatever we want to call it, the divine is just as accessible to us as it was to our ancestors.
Mm, mm,
And all of their magic and their practices and their traditions came out of their direct contact with it, and we can do the same.
mm, mhm, mhm, mhm.
And so one of my teachers was Martin Prechtel, and he talks about creating origins,
Mm,
and that, so there's origins, plural, because we are starting right now.
mm, mhm, mhm.
And so that, I guess that would be my last words would be, you just start where you are with what you have, and know that everything that your ancestors had available to them, the universe, there's nothing new under the sun. All of the elements are here, all of the chemicals, all of the nitrogen, and it's
Yeah,
all
yeah,
still here.
yeah. Yeah, the pattern of life is still unfolding all the time. And the magic, I guess I like to feel about magic that it's like syncing up with the pattern or recognizing the pattern or
Yeah.
leveraging the pattern towards particular intention. And the pattern's still ongoing. Creation, destruction, like birth, death, and the arcs in between. That's beautiful. Thank you for that. I think I definitely think we need that. I don't even want to call it hope, but like location of
Yes.
our agency. Yeah, yeah, lovely. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was so rich, and it definitely inspires me to explore the. I've explored more the Irish side, um,
Okay.
and I definitely feel inspired to explore my Italian side as well. Um, we'll put all of your like contact info and your book and how people can reach you and work with you in the show notes. Is there anything coming up that you want to share or promote?
Sure.
Sure.
So, I do have a 9-month course on Italian American, Italian folk medicine, that um, the next cohort is starting in October 2025. That is open for registration. That's a real in-depth one. And then for less in-depth, and low cost. I do monthly, like a study group book club on my Substack, and it's just like a different topic every month. And sometimes I read from my book. I might have some guest speakers on there. I just started it. This is like the third
Cool.
month. And
And
you
that's
can,
like drop in.
yeah, well, you have to be a subscriber. So you have to be an $8 a month subscriber. And so basically it's an $8
That seems very
live,
reasonable.
yeah,
Yeah.
live circle.
Cool. Great. We'll share links with that in the show notes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lisa. This was really
It was
special.
really nice to talk with you.
Yeah, you too.
You've been listening to Priestess of Ordinary Things, a podcast for spiritual misfits, modern mystics, and folks of all genders tasked with tending the sacred in everyday life. If you're a spiritual misfit who feels lost, stuck, or hungry for connection and wanting more resources for being more grounded in your relationship to your body and to the earth, go to my website at www.katefontana.com/earth-magic and get the free gift I created just for you. It's called Earth Magic, 3 simple celebrations of spiritual nourishment. Also, make sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if there's something you heard here that was meaningful to you, please let me know in the comments. I read all of them, and it really helps me know that I'm speaking to real people and not just out into empty space. Lastly, if there's someone in your life you think could benefit from what you heard here, I'd be so grateful if you'd share it with them. You belong here. Don't give up. May we dance through these times, awake and together.